your child falls. They scrape their knee on the concrete. For a second, maybe two, there is nothing. No sound. No tears. Just a strange, suspended silence. And then they see you. And everything breaks open. The crying starts the moment you arrive. It gets louder. It gets harder. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you think, did I make this worse? Did I do something wrong? The answer is no. But the real reason this happens will change how you think about your child forever. Most parents assume that crying is about pain. That the louder the cry, the more it hurts. But that is not what is happening in that moment on the playground. What you are witnessing is not an escalation of pain. It is the activation of something ancient. Something written into your child's nervous system long before language, long before playgrounds, long before the word mom even existed. To understand it, you have to go back. Way back. Not to childhood. To evolution. For almost all of human history, being alone meant danger. A child separated from their caregiver in the wilderness was a child at risk. Predators moved fast. Accidents happened without warning. The safest place a young human could ever be was close, physically close, to a trusted adult. The brain evolved around this truth. It built an alarm system. And that alarm system is still running in your child right now, in the 21st century, in a world with concrete sidewalks and bandages and hospital rooms, as if none of that has changed. Here's what that alarm system looks like in practice. When your child is hurt and you are not there, their nervous system shifts into a kind of controlled holding pattern. Psychologists call this the stress response, but what it actually feels like from the inside is a strange, focused calm. The body suppresses the emotional reaction and channels everything into survival. Scan the environment. Stay alert. Find the caregiver. The pain is real. The distress is real. But the brain has decided, without asking, that this is not the moment to fall apart. Falling apart, when you are alone, is dangerous. Then you appear. And in the instant your child sees your face, specifically your face, your eyes, your posture, the alarm turns off. Or rather, it hands over control to something else entirely. Because now the threat is gone. The caregiver is here. The body finally gets permission to feel what it has been holding back. And everything comes out at once. This is what researchers call the safe haven effect. And it has been studied extensively, most famously by developmental psychologist John Bowlby, who spent decades documenting how children use their primary caregivers as what he called a secure base. Not just a source of comfort, a psychological anchor. The caregiver's presence doesn't cause the distress. It releases it. Mary Ainsworth built on Bowlby's work in the 1970s with a now famous experiment called the strange situation. She placed children in a room with their mothers, then had the mother leave briefly, then return. What Ainsworth found was striking. Children who had secure attachments to their mothers showed the most intense emotional responses when the mother came back, not because they were the most distressed, but because they felt safe enough to fully express it. Securely attached children cried harder on reunion. Because they trusted that the crying would be met. Read that again. Your child cries harder with you because they trust you more. The children who barely cried on reunion, who seemed almost unbothered by the mother leaving and returning, were not the most securely attached. They were the children who had already learned, at a very young age, that expressing distress didn't reliably bring comfort. They had learned to suppress. To hold it in. To manage alone. And that suppression, Ainsworth found, came at a cost, measurable in cortisol levels, in behavioral withdrawal, in long-term patterns of emotional avoidance. Your child's tears are not manipulation. They are trust made visible. But knowing this intellectually and feeling it in the moment are two very different things. Because in the moment, it still feels like you made it worse. You walked over to help, and the crying tripled. You offered comfort, and it seemed to escalate. Your nervous system reads this as failure. It is not failure. It is biology working exactly as designed. There is a neuroscientist named Allan Schore whose work on early brain development has become one of the most referenced bodies of research in child psychology. Schore has spent years studying what happens in the right hemisphere of an infant's and young child's brain during moments of emotional connection with a caregiver. What he found is that the caregiver's face, the expression in the eyes, the tone of voice, the quality of physical presence, directly regulates the child's nervous system. Not metaphorically. Literally. The caregiver acts as an external emotional regulator for a brain that has not yet developed the internal circuitry to regulate itself. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that says calm down, breathe, this will pass, is not fully developed in children until their mid-20s. That is not a parenting failure. That is neuroscience. Your child is not choosing to spiral. Their brain genuinely does not yet have the hardware to stop the spiral on its own. You are the hardware. Your presence is the off switch. So when your child sees you, two things happen at once. First, the stress hormones that were holding everything together begin to drop. Second, the emotional brain, the amygdala, the limbic system, gets flooded with the full weight of what just happened. The scraped knee. The fright. The loneliness of those few seconds before you arrived. All of it lands at the same time. And the child cries not because you made things worse, but because you made it safe enough to feel worse. This is also why the same fall that produces tears with you produces nothing with a stranger. Have you ever noticed that? A child falls at the park, scrambles up, looks around, doesn't see mom or dad, and just keeps running. But the moment that child spots a familiar face, the tears start. It looks like performance. It is not performance. It is the nervous system correctly identifying who is safe enough to feel things around. There are practical things that follow from understanding this. The first is that your instinct to say you're okay, stop crying, it's not that bad is not just unhelpful, it is working against the process. When a child is in the middle of the emotional release, the brain needs to complete the cycle. Interrupting it does not shorten it. It delays it, often making it longer and more intense later. What actually shortens the cycle is what you probably already do without knowing why it works. Get down to their level, make eye contact, use a quiet voice, say something that names what they feel. I see you. That was scary. It's okay to cry. The second thing is this: the intensity of the reaction tells you something important. A child who reserves their biggest emotional expressions for you is a child who has correctly understood something profound, that you are their person. That you are the one they don't have to perform for. The one they don't have to manage themselves around. The one they can completely fall apart with, because they know you will be there when the falling is done. That is an extraordinary gift to give a child. And most parents give it without ever realizing they're doing it. The third thing, and this is the one that stays with you, is that this doesn't stop in childhood. Adults do this too. You have done this. You held it together all day, at work, in traffic, in every small indignity that the world requires you to absorb in silence. And then you got home. Or you called the one person who knows you. And something in you released. Because a safe haven doesn't have an age limit. The brain that learned to hold on until the caregiver arrives never fully forgets that lesson. It just upgrades the caregiver. The next time your child sees you and everything gets louder, remember, you didn't cause it. You ended it. The tears are just the sound of your child's nervous system finally believing that the danger is over. That strange, suspended silence before you arrived? That was survival. What came after you arrived? That was trust. And trust, it turns out, has always been louder than pain.